All right. I believe we're live, everyone. This is Matt from soundrolling.com, and I am here with none other than Sound Speeds.
I stood
The
up the second that we started the stream.
I know, that's good because you can see, you
I had
can
to
see
leave.
we're,
Just,
we're keeping
I'm
it.
gonna leave you to do this all by yourself. You're gonna be me.
That's it. I knew
How's it going, Matt? Great
I
to see
knew
you,
that's
man.
a lot of practice. Yes, it's been a long time.
It
Unfortunately,
has.
because I apparently cannot read a calendar, I missed the epic, which is now yearly, right? How many years have you
It
been doing
is. We've
the
done it 3 years now.
Yeah, 3 years. It's amazing. How did it go?
It's always great. I mean, you were part of the first one,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, YouTube only archives the first 12 hours of a stream.
Ah,
So, and you came on at like hour 14.
yeah.
And unfortunately, I didn't realize that they didn't archive longer than 12 hours at the time. So unfortunately, I don't have your interview
That's
as a part of that, because that meant so much to me and David, New Zealand Sound Speed,
yeah.
because he was on there too, and it was us three guys talking, and we talked about how you basically started the weekly content, the daily content for a while here regarding production sound. And it was, it was awesome. I was already teaching classes at my union hall and teaching classes in general in person. But when you start doing it online, it kind of, you know, made me think about it. And so I started doing what I do now, or what I do in the classes. I started doing it internationally through YouTube, like you do. So that's cool. Just been
Yeah.
doing it ever since.
Well, that's it. It's been amazing seeing your channel explode, and you've definitely taken whatever tiny baton I had, and then ran
Oh,
ran a million miles ahead,
it's
which is amazing.
quite far from an explosion, but this is a niche of a niche of a niche. It's like there's not a whole lot of people that talk about what we talk about. There's not a whole lot of people that really get into uh the kind of conversations we like to have. If I wanted to talk about consumer audio, I could probably explode. But
Yeah,
I don't, because that's where the market is. But talking about production sound people, most of those guys don't go to YouTube for information. They call up a peer, they call up a vendor, they call up, somebody else. So that's why it's really cool to see the size, that we still have a few thousand subscribers
yeah,
each,
yeah, yeah.
because that's we're a niche of a niche of a niche, in the sense that, and that our audience doesn't care anything about us. And yet here we are on YouTube, at least. So it's really kind of cool that we're able to get as far as we had been.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that there hasn't been more of a shift. I mean, it seems like we're still very much, if you compare it, I guess, to the rest of the world in terms of how things have expanded and exploded with now everyone's, I don't know, doing AI and chatbots and all sorts of craziness. It still feels like the production sound world is very like forum, like old school kind of thing. Not that there should be any reason to like dramatically change it, but I still find it quite funny that it's still on a kind of old school, more like one-to-one relationships. That funny dynamic of that we're all in the same industry, but we're all kind of at the eating at the same table kind of
Yeah,
thing.
but at the same time, I can kind of understand it, because talking to a lot of old school mixers, for example, the guys that have been doing this for decades, they avoid social media as much as possible. A lot of sound mixers and boom operators and utilities that I know, as soon as they are done with the show, they unplug. They don't want to, they'll binge watch stuff on Netflix, but they don't like to get on social media. They'll only do that if they're looking for a show, because they'll
Yeah.
want to see if there's anything going on, and they certainly don't really want to go to YouTube, to start being part of, sound world again.
Yeah. No, very true. It's very, very interesting. And I saw that you started doing loads of your little showcases on various different brands. I
That
wanted
was
to
actually, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I just wanted to get your take of like some of the flavors of things that have been coming out this year or this past half year. But
Well, the reason I did that is because I was teaching a class in the real world, and I'm actually doing the same exact class this upcoming Thursday. So as of the time that we're doing this live stream, it is a Monday, and in 3 days from now, I'm doing the same class again. But last month, I taught a class about how to lav mic people and do different things. I went old school and showed some of the earliest ways that we had of putting microphones on people. I even showed the very first microphone that someone wore in a movie. That was
amazing.
Rex Harrison on my what is it? My Fair Lady.
Mm.
And I showed that, the actual microphone and stuff like that, and I showed what he used and why they had to do it, and talked about that. I showed how to make an old school football out of gaff tape, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And then I talked about how we used to just have moleskin. And then we started figuring out bunion cushions, added a little bit more of a padding to it. Then we started to have accessories made, usually by Rycoat. Then you had Bumblebee added with the Invisalign, and then you started having, Viviana, Ursa, Hydamike, all these different companies coming up with different philosophies on creating products. So I did a lot of showcases because I said to them, one of the cool things about teaching in-person classes and teaching on YouTube is that I have a worldwide audience and I have an in-person professional audience. So one of the things that I can do is reach out and say, hey, if you would like to, as an option, you could, would you like to send me anything for me to use to teach in classes? And I'll also showcase it on SoundSpeeds. So that's cool too. That's cool to be able to do that because it's also able to put the products in the hands of someone that can actually use them and will figure out what they like and what how they use certain products. And then I also do the same thing and introduce it to people who are maybe not familiar with the products, because there's a lot of people that watch our channels that do a lot of small productions, indies, maybe not haven't made it to the big guns yet and big boy shows, but they might not know about a lot of these products that would really help them out. I mean, and then that's kind of where I was originally when I started out doing sound. Is we had a very small market and we were not, the tax incentives weren't here in Georgia yet. So very seldomly did shows come through, and the shows that did usually brought crew. And then we only had a few core people here that would work on those shows when they came to town. And many of those people would even travel out of state because they were, we didn't have to work here. But when we started getting the shows coming here, we didn't know what we didn't know, because people were coming to town and they were doing the shows. And if we were lucky enough to get on a show with them as maybe a second unit, a lot of those guys had the mentality of, figure it out yourself. I've spent decades learning this stuff, and I'm not going to just tell you so that way, you can fast track it. You got to do the school of hard knocks there. And that's kind of one of the cool approaches about what you did originally with sound rolling, is that you started to teach people different things, because the idea and the philosophy I've always had, it seemed like you were doing very similarly online, which is that the only way we progress in society, move forward in any way, is by sharing information and by sharing knowledge and helping each other. It's like, I'm not, if I help you, if you help me, we're not putting ourselves down. We're helping to push each other forward. The person that actually mentored me, the only person that gave me the time of day back in the day, was a guy named Doug Cameron. And he's a very much a family guy who would always spend time with his family between shows, but he would still respond to my text messages, but he doesn't glue himself to his phone. He doesn't just live on his phone. So if I sent him a message, he would respond within, sometimes an hour, sometimes it'd be a couple of days, but he'd usually respond. But I always tried to make sure that I respected his time and only messaged him when I felt I needed some information, like that I couldn't find anywhere else. And he would sometimes, he and I would talk, and we would call each other and speak for a while. And then over the years, I started to share more and more information, and it became more of a sharing colleague type friendship where we were sharing information. And he passed about this time last year, maybe a little bit earlier. And one of the last text messages he sent me was that you're a credit to your craft, sir. And I have that as a text message. And that, to me, the fact that he said those words meant a whole lot, and it still does, because I never really, I haven't had a chance to see him in years, and he meant a whole lot to me, and he still does to this day. So, but the people that were sharing things online were few and far between, and people sharing things in person, you got a lot of lectures if you asked a veteran. So I mean, part of what we did here, what you did, what me and a few other people that took the reins, is basically sharing information, the tricks that the pros normally don't share, sharing it with worldwide audience, and making it a little bit more of a, well, you're not really sharing everything you know. You can teach the tricks, but it still takes experience to learn how to apply those skills.
Yeah.
So
There's
That's
loads of really great points there.
yeah.
Especially, I like to equate it to like a theory in swimming. It's almost like if you were to tell someone about the I don't know, a type of stroke, a type of like way of swimming, they still have to go out there and swim.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, with the especially like the showcases and things like that, the whole point is that when you're starting out, you don't, like you say, you don't know what you don't know, but also there's certain, when you're getting into bigger stuff like radio mics or recorders or this, that, and the other, they feel like you're choosing a more definitive path because of the price points of most of these, especially starting out. It's very expensive kind of route. You're kind of going down like the Mac PC kind of world. Now there's definitely been more and more kind of ways, more paths open,
Mhm.
but I still think it's really interesting to to be able to at least give people a flavor of stuff, to then be like, okay, well, maybe these couple of things work, because it's not about a kind of one size fits all. Definitely.
Yeah, it used to be that it was easier to mix and match analog transmitters.
Yeah.
You could just dial in on the frequency, and as long as you had the right, the right specs, then it would work. But the thing is, now we're digital. Now there's encryption. Now there's you have to a transmitter and a receiver are married, sometimes even paired.
Mm,
Like in the case of like the deity stuff. So I
yeah.
mean, you still have, and so now it's not like you can have you like this one brand's receivers and you like this other brand's transmitters and you can mix and match. It doesn't work that way. So
Yeah.
like, and it's even more so if you're interested in something like Zaxcom, because they have the recorder, they have their IFB system, they have their ZaxNet that talks to their transmitters and receivers and recorders and everything. So it's all, if to invest in that, you're going to be very well taken care of once you figure out their system and stuff. But it's quite an investment to get into it, but it's going to be there. And that's why you have the like, gain forwarding and stuff, which audio limit, well, sound devices now is doing to kind of try to emulate some of the features. You have people using Bluetooth apps to control. You have
Yeah. Electric.
WYSICOM, and it just everybody has their own approaches to doing things now, and so, but they're not as versatile where it's so easy for you to mix and match in your system what you want to anymore. They kind of don't want you to do that. They don't want to play
Yeah.
well. You
Yeah.
can't really
Definitely.
frequency coordinate outside of the wireless designer. You can, but it takes extra steps. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to balance up like efficiency with like the cost of and effort going into a workaround that might
Yeah.
save you money in the short term. It's better within a certain system of either wireless or even. So I mean, is your take that, for instance, sound devices and all these others, do you think that they're going to slowly try and, I don't know, like just be more, I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say, like more vertically integrated, as in basically sound devices will just go more into audio.
I don't think so. I mean, it just depends on the direction these companies go. Sound
Mm,
devices, they kind of acquired Audio Limited
yeah.
and brought them kind of under their wing, and I think that was just kind of a mutually beneficial partnership between them. But I don't necessarily think that WYSICOM's going to do that and suddenly join forces with Zoom
Sonosec.
or Sonosex joins forces with sound devices. Or I think everybody has their own world that they like to live in. They specialize in. If there's an opportunity, like what was it, 12, 13 years ago, whatever it was, when coffee sound was still the king out there in California. It was one of the main companies a lot of people called for production sound stuff, and then Glenn True bought the location and it became a True Audio location. So I mean that was years ago, and I remember when that happened, but it was still it was still kind of kept in the family. I mean, it was still the
Mhm.
same people, still the same feeling. It's just it had a different name, and now it's very much now we all know True, and a lot of people that
Yeah.
do film stuff this day and age won't even know what coffee sound is.
Yeah.
Or if they spell it, they'll spell it, with a two
True.
e's at the end and not an ey. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, but it's I don't necessarily think the vertical integration. I think that's as very much a Zaxcom thing. They really like that approach. But at the same time, it kind of just if it works into someone's business plans, I know Electrosonics is pretty much happy with the way that they do things, and they're very on the ball with how they do things. Comes the same kind of way. They kind of have their business path, and they'll probably stick to it. I can't see them combining forces. I can't see either one of them combining forces with Sound Devices, because of course Sound Devices now has audio
Yeah.
limited. But I mean, I think it's kind of like, if it happens to work mutually beneficially, then it might happen. But I don't see any relationships that are gonna necessarily just start out for that reason.
Yeah,
You
and I
know,
guess the interesting ones were like when Sound Devices brought out like the super slots, and that kind of all it
Mhm.
became more of like an industry standard that way from Lectrosonics, Wizzy, and all the others. And now they're getting like 4-channel receivers and like all
And
the
Wizzy,
things.
I think, has a 16. They have a one rack
Yeah,
space 16. And I
yeah,
think Zaxcom has a, what's it, 1.5 rack 8-channel receiver, something like that. I mean, it's getting crazy. It's getting crazy. And here in the States, I think when was it? I think it was, going off of memory, someone could check us. June 12th, I think 2010 is when we lost up to like 865 up to block 33 megahertz in the United States. We couldn't transmit above like 700. And
yeah.
then on July 13th of 2020, we lost above 608. So I mean,
Mm,
there's like the guard bands, and there's duplex gaps and stuff like that you can still transmit on. And if you have a part 74 license like I do, you can actually transmit in those. And I think there's even an area of like 3 megahertz or something like that that you can work in between the upload and download of the um. There's a little gap between the upload for cell phone communication and the download of cell phone communication.
mm.
And there's like I think there's a 9 megahertz little gap in there they call the duplex gap that you can actually transmit in
Yeah, I think that was
if
similar.
you're licensed. And I think there's a little part of it that's not, that if you don't have license. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, it was yeah, I think there were similar times for us. We lost 800 as well. I think we
Mm,
followed a similar suit. We didn't Now the GB band for most things is 606 to like 646. So, but a lot of people are running at like 500s and stuff because a lot of
yeah,
people have stuff from
we have 470 to 608, so we have 138 megahertz,
yeah,
or
that's
138, yeah, bandwidth right there.
yeah. That's really good. Nice. So, yeah. So I should probably say as well, because we're getting so wrapped up in it,
138.
that people are that we're live still right now. If you see a little live button, otherwise you're watching the replay. You can still leave a comment, and we'll get back to you. But otherwise, get in the chat as well. Have you ever done binaural microphones? This is
I
something
have
you do.
not, more than just a hobby and playing around with it. Um, I mean, we tried using it on a show probably 10 years ago, hiding a binaural microphone with two people that were kind of close on this little small table in a coffee shop scene, but it didn't really work out. Um, and we don't really in production sound do a whole lot of MS recording or anything like that. So binaural, and the idea of having stereo effects and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with Blumline, which is totally not binaural, but still is Blumline stereo recording. I'm familiar with MS. I'm familiar with AB space pairs, and all that, and XY patterns and stuff like that. It's just we don't really do that in the world of production sound. So
Yeah, I think it has to be quite specialist. I've started getting more into recording stuff for spatial audio. So
mm,
that's where it's basically you just have to record literally all over the place at the same time, and then they do it more in post. It feels like more of a post play more and more. But SR3D, I did a video ages ago with them because I think it's quite interesting now. We're getting slowly, although everyone pretends it's a lot closer, into VR world, that then when everyone's wearing headsets and stuff, there's potentially more of a use case. But I think the practicality of like shooting with it on a live location with a lot of people and trying and using that as the only source is a good reference, but not really the like the solution.
yeah, it's kind of like the idea of scanning actors and just
Yeah,
let's VFX recreate them as opposed to actually shooting old school style. I
yeah,
It's like people always say, you can make someone's voice in AI and stuff. It just doesn't. The big thing that's lacking is emotion. It's like you can still see when there's a CGI person there, their features are not exactly right. I mean, they still seem they're like,
Yeah. Basically, if you rest your face
you
and
know,
you
it's
think you could be dead, then you're
yeah,
probably AI.
and the voices, you know, even if they're not robotic, like, you know, Adobe Podcast AI and Voice.ai and those kind of things. So now, even if they're not robotic, there's still elements that are missing
Yeah.
that you really wish were there. And I don't, and the thing is though, I mean, there's potentially going to be like a slider at some point, add more warmth, add more personality, more energy and stuff like that. But still, you have to train it for the people. Mike
Yeah.
Delgadio here on YouTube even said, I think he did a short just the other day saying that people have modeled his voice and deep faked his voice twice.
Mm.
And one person told him he did it, and I guess he found the other one. But the fact that you can do that kind of thing and talk as someone else is scary. But at the same time, I don't think someone's going to suddenly start getting a whole bunch of audiobook contracts because they can model his voice.
Yeah.
Even if, you know, I just don't think that's going to be a reality. Now, someone like James Earl Jones doing the Darth Vader voice, when James Earl Jones eventually passes, that's going to be the option they're going to have to go to. And they're going to probably take the recordings, and he's done decades and decades of sounding like that in movies. They're probably going to model his voice as well as they possibly can and go forward with that in the Star Wars universe, releasing, you know, more movies and TV shows with the Darth Vader voice. But I can't imagine it becoming a regular thing
Mm.
because it takes away from the performance. Just like so many things. It's just like, you know, it's Ken Strain, boom operator here, um, in New York. He says he has a great phrase that I really love, and that is the lav captures the dialogue, but the boom captures the performance.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good. I mean, I've used that before. And, you know, because you can wear a lav, it's a microphone. It's the same thing as any other microphone that just captures the words. But if you really want to capture the performance, you don't think about what someone's wearing. You just think about what they're doing and get into their soul. And that's where the real true art of booming is. And putting a microphone where it needs to be. That's what's cool.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to be said about that contextual, like, just element of it. And this is why it works so well in like documentaries and other things where the where you kind of just you just get the whole performance. You're not getting an isolated thing that you're rebuilding. And I guess that's the similar thing with AI. Okay, you can rebuild the voice, now try and then do all of the editing to like fit it into a certain room or a thing. And it just feels like it's such a big workaround to something that you could just literally get someone who's actually trained to
But I
to
mean,
go out.
it would. But then, what's going to happen if an actor has to do a character? If
Yeah,
Sean Penn has to change his voice for a role, you know, or someone actually has to vocalize something differently, or speaks with a lisp, or speaks, you know, more nasally, and has to do that as part of their character. You know, if they do something like that, are you just going to recreate that with AI? Or are you going to tell the actor you have to go in there and spend 3 hours in front of this computer and train it how to do it? They're just going to say, geez, I don't want to ADR this whole thing. Just record it
yeah.
live. Let's go old school. That's what's going to end up happening. It's going to
Well,
take a lot of creativity out of it when you tell an actor that we're just going to get your sound later. Don't worry about it. If sound departments are ever removed from features, it's going to be a huge, big, bad thing that happens.
yeah, I know. It's already such a great return on investment for such a small amount. The fact that they would go to such lengths to re-record it. I get it if there's a feature where you're taking everything that they recorded on set and then you're able to then try and do some ADR thing. But again,
Yeah.
how are you ever gonna you're basically then not going to be able to direct it, or you're just going to be directing an AI when you could just be getting the person. And again,
Yes.
what is it going to save in the long term if it
Well,
doesn't save
one of the
money?
things I tell UPMs and producers all the time when they're just like, we really don't have that in the budget. We really don't need to do that. I'm like, I'll look at them and I'll say, let's not pretend like the sound department's really your biggest expense here. You know, we're
Visual design.
pretty, you pretty much pay us to be there every single day and we figure out the situation regardless of what it is. If we ask for something, it's because it's useful. We're not going to ask for a second boom when we're doing a scene with two people.
Yeah.
You know, when we could throw utility out there. We don't need to have a designated second boom. If you bring out a cast of 15 people, yeah, we're probably going to ask for a second boom for the day when they add their third, fourth, and fifth cameras. You
Yeah.
know,
That was
that's
always the other funny thing. There's no like weird. I don't have they made some sort of like ratio where they're like as soon as you get a fourth camera, like you need to boom up because
I
it's getting
wish
ridiculous. It's
I
like
wish 600 has such a strong union because they're nationwide. It's one union for camera.
mm, yeah,
And as opposed to like, we have 52, we have 695, we have 479,
okay,
478, 6, all these different unions, every single, union across the United States that has mixed locals in different regional areas, they almost all of them have sound. And or they have their own designated sound, like 52 in New York or 695 in California, which goes all over. But I
yeah,
mean, it's like no, there's not really not a way that we really are going to have that power unless we all combine into one local. And I don't know that people are that all the different little small unions are going to want to give up their sound people because the sound people are like in my union, for example, I teach a lot of classes. I think I'm coming up on like 50 in-person classes in the
oh,
past 10 years, something like that. And I think it's like there's not other crafts that do the same kind of thing. And the fact that we are usually in the unions, or at least in our union,
yeah,
sound people make up some of the executive roles,
interesting.
or have throughout time, over the course of the time I've been there. There's usually a sound person or two or three or multiples that are part of the executive board or part of like the vice president or something like that.
Mm,
Um, because a lot of sound people, I don't want to say you have too much time on your hands because you certainly don't. But sound mixers, for example, can take on an executive role and make phone calls or handle something like or handle the union business during the day very effectively while on set at work during a long light setup. And they're very dedicated that way, and they're very good at their jobs. So and I've known boom operators and sound utilities that have been part of the executive boards too, and they're very dedicated too. And if they have a long lighting setup, they'll get their emails going and or respond to text messages, make phone calls, just like I do when we're between long setups, and I'll make a phone call about a class that I have coming up. You
yeah,
know, sound people are very dedicated to their crafts. So, um,
yeah. That's really interesting. Well, I wonder if ever they'll blend, not necessarily completely blend, but maybe just on like a class action like kind of thing, like
I don't know.
one policy. That I mean, yeah, it seems like it's in everyone's interest if everyone's not sharing over, but
Yeah, but at the same time, you still have to you still have the unions that probably are not going to want to let their sound people go. That's the thing, is that
mm,
you can say it until you're blue in the face,
yeah,
but people have to be willing to let us leave and join because if not, then what are you doing? So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Interesting. Yeah, I always found over here there's no specific. Well, there are some kind of um the sound areas within a general union. I've never been. I think just because I've kind of done I haven't gone to the levels where like massive TV shows and stuff where I think unions become very effective because you're doing a
yeah,
more kind of standardized kind of work environment, for lack of a better term. Um, so it's always been interesting that kind of everyone's kind of it's again that thing of we're all individual, but then all trying to work together at some different points. It's quite fun.
we're all technically freelancers, even though we will work. We got hired officially by a show and become their employee.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
really funny when we're between shows, we could say we're unemployed, but more technically we're freelance.
yeah.
So, but as soon as we're hired, we're technically no longer freelance, we're employees of the company.
Yeah. Uh,
Because that's the reason why, like here in the United States, I don't know if it's the same in the UK. If you are
Similar.
freelance and you get a 1099, you're technically not allowed to tell someone to show up when they can and cannot do their job.
Yeah,
You're freelance. You can't say, okay, I don't want to pay you benefits and whatever else as an employee, but you need to be here at this certain time. They could say, okay, fine, I'll be there like half an hour after that. Or
yeah,
I need to be there an hour before because I got to be gone 30 minutes after that time. That's technically, if you're a freelancer, that's technically what you have the ability to do.
yeah.
But they hire you and they want you to show up by call time. I mean, could you imagine if every single production person was a freelancer, and people just decided that there's a 2-hour gap and they're just going to show up to work at some point. Camera department shows up an hour after everybody else. The sound department showed up an hour before everybody else, and then says, well, we don't have anything to do. We're going to leave, and then we'll come back in a couple of hours, and they would all fall apart. It would
Yeah,
all fall apart. So we have to be employees
interesting.
in
Because
order to make it work.
there's like a blend, especially in some of the TV stuff that I've done, where like if you're bringing equipment, if you're the mixer, then you can be like self-employed. Although I guess, yeah, I mean, it's still, I guess, technically employed for that contract, aren't you? Whereas
Well,
with boom operators, then they're on like a full like pay as you earn. It's called. It's just like the normal being regularly employed over here.
well, sound mixers here, they will still be employees on staff, but
Ah,
their equipment is part of what's called what's their own equipment company. So they will basically create a side company, an LLC, an S corp, something like that, or even an incorporation at some point. And what they'll do is they'll use that as the company that is the vendor, the sound vendor for the show that provides sound gear. And so
yeah,
that show would be that if it's, let's say, the equipment rental is $750 a day, then you basically say, for that you get a recorder, you get this, this, up to a certain number of wires, up to a certain number of contacts. Anything additional is going to be a la carte and carry with it an additional fee. But but boom operators and stuff, if you have gear that's on rental, it's part of a kit. It's a difference.
yeah,
I actually have a video. It's in a boom operator playlist, and it's part of the 3BO series that have where I talk about the differences in kits versus package rental, and what the catches are that you need to be aware of with regards to your kit rental. Like, for example, it used to be that you would get the rental every single day. When you negotiate a rental, let's just say all you have in your kit is one boom pole, a boom caddy, and a pair of headphones, and the total of everything is, let's say, $250, $1,250. And you negotiated to have a rental of $100 a week for
mm,
that boom. But this is a 6-month-long show. You're going to pay yourself over and over again for that gear throughout the course of that run of the show. But still, it's a rental because the show has no reason to buy it and have it as an asset later.
yeah.
But they will rent it. Well, what a lot of these companies started doing is they'd say, okay, we're going to put a cap on it of 70% value of the total kit's, of the total kit's
Ah,
worth.
okay.
Then they changed it to 40%. Then they changed it to
Oh, wow.
35% in some contracts. And with a kit, you're also, if you're not allowed to if part of your gear gets broken and damaged on a show, you can't an L&D it. You can't fill out a loss and damage report and have it replaced by production because it's part of a kit.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I state in is that's a big catch, especially now post COVID, that we're in the world of digital paperwork a whole lot of the time, where you can't just scratch out something that you don't like.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to do that all the time on the equipment, the kit rental form. I would always scratch out the thing that says production is not liable for loss and damage,
Yeah, that's great.
except for the kit. I always scratch that out. And I would almost every single time have a UPM or producer say, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't do that? I disagree with that line. And they'll say, but we're paying you rental. I'm like, yes, but if my gear is on the sound trailer and the trailer is in the hands of the Teamsters and the Teamsters, leave our trailer in a weird location and it's stolen, am I supposed to just suddenly suck up all the all the cost of everything when when I supply an inventory of my gear to you for the show, you put it on your production insurance,
Yeah.
you will end up claiming, you'll end up having doing an insurance claim on it. You'll get the money for it and you have no obligation to pay me for my gear. I'll just be out my gear. No, that doesn't work for me. You have to pay me back my gear. We'll say, well, we'll just sign the form and we'll figure out later. No, no, no. You sign the form and that's what's gospel. That's what matters.
Yeah, yeah.
So I always I tell people, if it's a day playing thing, if I'm between shows, I'll always say to the mixer when they say, hey, can you come in and fill in for a couple of days? I'll say, sure. Am I using your gear? I'll say, is there a kit rental? If they say no, I'll say, okay, can I use your gear then? Because I don't want to bring gear if it's not going to be on rental. And they'll say, sure. And I can use whatever. If they say there is a kit rental, I'll say, okay, then I'll bring my own gear. And what I do is I will not sign the paperwork until I'm done day playing.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So And technically, productions have gotten very lazy with digital start paperwork, and they won't send it to you sometimes until a few days after the show, after
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
been gone.
So you're trying to
And
invoice stuff.
and that's what's really crazy is even if you do your start paperwork then, technically you haven't signed the document. So you could technically go around and say whatever you wanted to whoever. You could offend people. You could act very unprofessionally with the actors and actresses on the show because you haven't signed anything and they're not following that paperwork, following up with the paperwork before you start anymore. They don't care. So it's like, granted, you don't want to do that. You wouldn't last very long in the industry, but you technically could.
You get a reputation.
Because you get a reputation to showing up there and then instantly start calling the leading actress a cupcake. She's not going to like that, especially since she doesn't know you. If she knows you and you joke around a whole lot, there's some people that I've worked with that we joke around a whole lot like that. But it's like, you can't do that. But the way that a lot of these shows are doing their paperwork now, it's very lax. So it's.
I always find paperwork's really interesting, especially with the things about like overtime rates and stuff. Like they're just really funny. Like the comebacks of just like, oh well, we won't go over or whatever, or da 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 da, and it's like, well, yeah, that's fine. But if you do, then I kind of need to know what the deal is. Otherwise, it's like it's the difference between 5 minutes grace and 5 hours of torture.
Yes, and there's a video I did called "Avoiding Indie Abuse." It's one of the first ones I did on the channel, like almost 6 years ago.
Yeah,
that video, I say that one of the things that we need to do is when we go out there and we book a show, if it's an indie or a small show, it's not union organized. One of the things you really need to stipulate is that that you need to specify that after 8 hours. You're going to get time and a half. After 12 hours, you get double time. And if you want to negotiate after 15 hours for triple, that's on you.
Yeah,
but then if you are getting a solid day rate, which many people do on small indies, you'll end up with a small, you'll say, okay, you're going to, as a day rate, we don't have a very big budget. It's an indie. We're going to only be able to pay you $250 a day. Okay, well, that's way below what I'm normally used to making, but $250 a day. Okay. How many hours are you scheduling your days? And they'll say 12. Okay. Yeah. And then you say, okay, but here's my deal. If we go over 12 every day, then my hourly rate is 25 an hour, but we're in double time at that point. So so you're going to pay me $50 an hour over that. And if they're going to be like, whoa, I can't do that, and say, well, wait a minute, I thought you were scheduling 12-hour days. As long as we wrap before 12 hours, I'll wrap off the clock. That's, technically within the day rate. If we've wrapped, if we are still going and you have not adhered to that 12-hour day, that's when I'm going to have a problem with it. That's when it's like, oh, well, we came all behind and whatever, because you don't have a first AD. So you're just, flying by the seat of your pants. I'm not going to do an 18-hour day again on the same, small day rate, do you favors, because a lot of these producers, they will book a crew for a flat day rate, and because it's coming out of their pocket, they're going to work them as much as they possibly can. And so what I always say is, okay, well, this is my deal. My hourly rate is this, but I'm in double time after 12. And if they say I don't agree with that, they'll say, I thought you were booking 12s. If you're scheduling 12s, it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah. And then if they start futzing around, that's when you start to say, okay, so are you booking 12? Are you scheduling 12s or not? If you're scheduling 12s, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't have a problem in the world with this. If you're not scheduling 12s, then I need protection.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to end up working. There's been too many times in the past. I can remember years and years ago, maybe 15 years, a show booked me, and it was only $100 a day. But I remember I didn't have anything else going on. It was about this time of year where we didn't really have a whole lot of work, and it was either work or not. And it was a small project with only like 7 or 8 crew members. And the guy who booked me, he only booked me for like 2 days, I believe. But both of those days, he was like, well, I'm paying you $100 a day, man. You're going to be working. You're going to be working constantly. And I'm like, and at one point I remember we had been there for almost 20 hours. Damn. And I remember saying, dude, you're paying me less than minimum wage.
Yeah.
You can't expect me to continue to care when you've worked me 20 hours.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't care at this point. I'm going to be leaving very soon.
Yeah.
I'll finish this setup or whatever, but we've already done like 20 other setups in this scene. I'm about to leave because at this point we're well below minimum wage. Unless you want to start, you want to start paying more, even then I'm not crazy about it because it's already a 20-hour day. And the next day he says, "Okay, fine, we'll go ahead and call a wrap," because at this point we started being kind of loud. They brought us in the next day, and this same exact thing happened at 18 hours in. I was like, "All right, look, I'm not doing this crap anymore." And I was like, "Nope, we're not going to do this. I'm leaving again." I was like, in the past, I was like, out of the past 72 hours, you've worked us for over half of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's
There's
insane.
no way in the world you're going to keep me here any longer when you're only paying me $200 for this. Because here's another thing to think of also. If something were to happen to me and if I were to drive off the road or something like that after that first day, who in the world am I going to get to cover me for $100 a day?
Yeah, yeah.
People are going to say, would you cover me? Why? I'm not going to get out of bed for $100 a day. No.
Yeah.
So there's people need to be aware of different things when they go, and if a show decides they don't want to agree to your terms, that's on them. You don't have to do it.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's very true. And it brings up like all the work with like Jeff Wexler and stuff like that. And all of these things about like trying to schedule something over a day when you could schedule it over 2 days, and it becomes just as effective, if not more effective, because people are actually treated like humans and like
well,
not life-saving work.
one of the things that we hear a lot of is that a lot of the times we are paid most when we are at our worst. We're
Mm,
just at that point mentally frazzled. We're barely able to think. They're like, "Okay, how do we do this scene? Is it this and then this and then
yeah,
uh do I get on a ladder and boom this or because they're doing this and this, what am I doing here? You can't even think straight.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yet that's when you're getting double time, and that's when, and
The irony.
that's what's really crazy. It's like a lot of these shows, they were like, "Well, we're only gonna book this location one day. It's more expensive for us to have 2 days, so we're just gonna abuse the crew." It's like, no, let's not do that. Let's not do
That
that. Let's
that
actually
is really funny.
be responsible. Let's do things the right way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They should almost have a decentralization after 12 hours. Should be like, "And now you're getting paid half. How do you feel? And now you're
Mm.
getting paid a quarter. How do you feel?" And then everyone would be walking off so much faster. Just be like, no, I'm not working for 25 pence an hour."
Except that when you're part of a union, you can't just decide to strike. You can't just, decide unless the entire crew, not grew, is in solidarity. If the
Mm,
entire crew
interesting. Mm,
starts to come together, like I do know this happened on a show a couple years ago here, that the entire crew was being worked a minimum of 15 hours every single day. And they just stood together collectively. Every single department talked to everybody and says, "Okay, we are going to, at this point, at the safety meeting in the morning on whatever else, we're going to say that production has to get their act together and we're not doing starting, like, and they put their foot down. They said, if that was like a Friday, they said, starting Monday, we're not working over 12.
mm,
None of us are. If we're not done, we're just going to all leave." And
mm,
it was collectively the entire crew had made a specific decision to take a stand to abusive practices on that show. And because they did it, it was not a union thing. It was every department as employees. They didn't feel it was safe. They felt it was an abuse of them, and they said, "We're not doing it anymore." And collectively, as employees, they took a stand, and they
mm.
did that. But you can't say, "Well, we have 3 departments here, and the other ones might join in. Let's go ahead and start the process." Didn't work that way. You're gonna end
Interesting.
up having the sound department, the props department, and the on-set dressers walk away, but camera's still ready to go, and they're gonna say, "You know what? We're gonna replace the props people, we're gonna replace the sound people and the on-set dresser. That's it. They're gone." And they'll
Yeah, yeah,
replace them. It's
yeah.
gotta be solidarity all the way around. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
That's funny because over here it seems more like the electric and gaffers and stuff have the kind of sway of everything because they just go, "I'm just going to unplug everything," and then everyone can just go to hell and
Yeah.
then just drop
But,
it.
the same kind of thing will happen here. I've been on shows before where we've had ice storm. People always
Wow.
laugh and make fun of us here in Georgia because they're like, you'll see on the news, the entire city shuts down because of a quarter inch of ice. And you'll see people on, like up north, they're like, "Are you kidding me here?" But the thing is, though, ice is different than snow. I would
Yeah,
take snow over ice every single day because what we'll have is we'll like a few years ago we had what we called snowpocalypse. Our
yeah.
roads here in Georgia, for example, are treated to withstand and not ice over for an additional 20 degrees below freezing. This is Fahrenheit we're talking about. So
Yeah.
32 degrees Fahrenheit, the water freezes, but 22 degrees and below is when the road could potentially freeze. It's treated to not. Well, we had this one time, I think it was in February, and we had this cold front that was coming in because here in Georgia we have the Atlantic Ocean on the east coast, we have the Gulf of Mexico in the southwest, we have the plains on the west, we have the Blue Ridge Mountains and the North Georgia Mountains, and the Appalachian Mountains on the north side. Throughout the north region, and whichever the prevailing winds are is going to kind of dictate what our weather is like. That's the reason why it can literally be 35 degrees in the morning and 75 in the afternoon, and we don't bat an eye. And it's crazy to imagine, practically freezing in the morning, but then like shorts and we're all sweating outside in the afternoon. But that is Georgia. But we had an event come through a few years ago that we called Snowpocalypse, where the temperatures were hovering right around like 30, 20 something degrees. And then we had this cold front where over the course of about a 15-minute time period, the temperature would drop 15 degrees.
Wow.
At the same time as we had a little bit of freezing rain. And our governor at the time, or the I think it was the governor, decided in his infinite wisdom to ignore all the weather reports until the day of. And then he said, we don't want our school buses to get caught on the road, so let's go ahead and release all schools not at 3:00. Let's release them all at noon. Well, as soon as you do that, every parent in the entire state, in the entire state, gets concerned because their kids, they have to get home to see their kids when they get off the school bus. So all the school buses were sent out immediately. Everybody left their offices immediately, and and about 4 hours worth of rush hour traffic filled up our streets in less than half an hour. And it completely bottlenecked. Then came through the snow, the ice front, where people who were in the stop and go traffic, they were stop and go, stop and go. The road got rained on. It then froze instantly, and so all of a sudden you hit the gas just a little bit to go another 10 feet in the traffic jam, and you slide into the car in front of you. That was the entire That was the entire Metro Atlanta area, and we had thousands of car wrecks. It looked like The Walking Dead, but frozen over on the side of the interstate because cars had spun in every single direction and stuff, because that was the reality of it. I was working on a show with Samuel L. Jackson and John Cusack called Cell at the time.
Yeah.
And John Cusack and Sam Jackson, they called rap, and they said, be safe, everybody going home. And this is hours after the governor declared a state of emergency. And I remember saying, raising my hand and saying, why did you call rap? Because we don't have any place to go. We might as well just keep on shooting here. And they said, I'll tell you why we have to rap. It's because in the state of Georgia, if you don't call rap when the governor declares a state of emergency, if you don't rap, you lose your insurance. That's what he said. So he said, so, and I was like, so where are we supposed to go? The roads you should have released it 6 hours ago. Now the roads are all iced over. And so, but because of that, to get back to what we were saying here, this tiniest little bit of ice is a deadly thing here in Georgia, and you'll have cars spinning out all over the place. Yeah. And I forgot where we were starting to go originally with all this. I'm Mr. Tangent. I'll take tangents and just start, talking about anything and everything.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, well, we can break it back in. How about we go back to some like classics of boom poles, because obviously you're a boom operator. And how do you go about choosing a boom pole? Because that's surprising. There's quite an amount of different boom poles that you can get, carbon fiber, X, Y, and Z. And so for maybe not just people starting out, but just in general, to get back to, again, more of the stuff we were talking about with like flavoring different things and trying different things. Are there certain things people should be looking for in a boom pole? What's your kind of hot take on that?
Well, everything depends.
As always.
And that's the God's honest truth of it. Now, I do have a video. It's less than 10 minutes long. That it's called like Pro Boom Operator Discusses Boom Poles or something like that.
Classic.
9 minutes and change. And in that, I come up with a list of 15 things that you need to think about when buying a boom pole. And it could be that you have oilier or drier hands. It could be that you would rather have a lighter pole that's more flexible. Because if you have a pole that's more flexible, like a K-Tech, like an old school K-Tech Classic, for example, if you walk, the pole will actually absorb some of that, so that way the microphone will stay relatively still. The whole pole will spring around it, and the actual microphone will move very little. You have yourself something like an ambient, and it's more pencil straight. So that way, if you move it, the whole thing will move. It's less forgiving. But when I tell you this, if I hold the boom over my head and I'm quickly snap queuing between people, I would much rather have in my hand something that snaps exactly where I want it to, as opposed to something that does this number and bounces and overshoots, because that throws off all my balance. I can snap it just because, you remember, I have a martial art background. So if I did something with a staff, I could snap a snap exactly where I wanted it to. So a staff, I'd go snap, 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 however I wanted to. But with a boom pole, it's very similar. Once you figure out the ways of balance and once you figured out how to handle it. And personally, I would much rather it snap exactly where I want it to. That's just me, though. But with boom poles, you also have a number of segments. If you're going to travel a whole lot with a boom pole and you're doing mainly E&G stuff, you might want to have yourself a 6-section boom that folds down small enough for you to put inside of your luggage. That way you don't have to keep it as a separate thing. They're going to the airport's going to wonder if it's a pipe bomb, because of the shape or whatever in your luggage. But once they figure it out, this is just a boom pole because it's next to microphones and a recorder and everything else. They'll figure it out. But if you have a 6-section versus a 4-section, the 4 sections are longer poles because they don't have as many sections to collapse down. So, I mean, you may want more or less sections because you travel. You may want more or less sections because it's easier for you to just take out less sections. You may like the way certain knuckles feel. You may like the fact that certain companies are more from like your country. Like you may like Panamic more because you're in the UK. I may like K-Tech or PSC or Loon before they went under when Don Wetzel died a few years ago. But I may prefer an American brand because it's easier to get serviced. And but if you're in France, you might like VDB. If you're in Germany, you might prefer Ambient. That might be a regional thing. It may be that the pro sound shop in your area can only get 1 or 2 brands, and that's what you can actually get available to you. It may be that you always boom with gloves, and so it doesn't matter to you. But then what feels different with gloved hands? Do your hands slide differently over one pole or another? If you buy an aluminum pole, it's going to be freezing in the winter versus a graphite pole, but it is cheaper, but you have less options. So if you get yourself like a K-Tech Avalon pole, you can get either a graphite or you can get yourself an aluminum. If you get the aluminum one, it will be cheaper, but it's going to be freezing. A graphite one will provide, will be lighter. It's going to last, longer. It's not going to be nearly as cold. So there's a whole bunch of things to keep in mind, but I always constantly refer people back to your boom pulse cheat sheet. I still refer to that. I remember years ago I was teaching a class and I said, "Do you mind if I show it in a class?" And you said, "Sure," but I don't send it to anybody, but I would at least show it and say, "Look, you can go down this list." And now we have different. There's different models, like the Mighty Booms aren't on there. The Series 5 ambient booms aren't on there. Some of them are tried and true, like the PSCs and the Panamics. Those are still the same. But, we now have all these other brands, creating new poles too. So Loon's not even in the picture anymore.
And with gloves, I think it's very interesting because what is the, I guess, the fabric on your gloves that you're using with the boom? Do you use like gripped gloves, just for people that are thinking which gloves will do?
A lot of people swear by cotton. Me, I don't. What I personally like, and I always use on set, is the Mechanics is the brand, 0.5 millimeter, what they call the 0.5 millimeter gloves. They're made by a company called they're made by Mechanics though, Mechanix. And because they're 0.5 millimeter, they're extremely thin. They're almost like form fitting, but it's reinforced right through here with an extra piece of leather. And they're leather gloves, and they have like a fabric on the back of it. I actually have them in the other room. I could go and get them if you wanted to see. Actually, it's out in the garage with my kit. But what makes them really cool is that it's reinforced right here. So if I do cable wrapping, it's
Interesting.
reinforced right through there. I used to use motorcycle gloves because they were reinforced there too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when I found the mechanics, I fell in love with them because they're form fitting, they're skin tight, basically, very thin, but they're very soft, where they don't have an actual material and it's very soft leather. So I can
Mm,
literally tap the boom and you're not going to hear it.
really interesting.
Mhm.
And I guess more maybe of a left field question then. How about skincare routine for your hands? Do you have one?
Uh, Skincare routine for my hands. Basically, no. I mean, I'll clip my nails
That's
whenever
yeah,
I think about it.
yeah.
Um, I if there's a little if I get a little nick or something like that and I cut my hand, I do the thing you're not supposed to do. I grab tweezers and yank it off, and then it ends up tearing a chunk out of my hand, which then I just sit there and I pick at until it's a big huge hole. Like I said, you're not supposed to do this stuff, but
No.
yeah, or I'll grab fingernail clippers and I'll clip the little flaps or whatever they are. Do exactly what you're not supposed to do, and then aside from that, I just basically just wash them. But
Yeah,
I don't use the regular over the counter stuff. I use a soap here in America called Duke Cannon, which is it's a
amazing
made in
name.
America brand. Huh? You've heard of it?
Yeah, amazing name as well.
Big honking bars of soap, but I tell you, they'll last. One bar will last you months, and it's made well. It's not like the Ivory and the Dove and all the regular brands. They're big honking big brands of soap. They smell make the bathroom smell great. You barely get the thing wet, and you go like this with it, and it will lather up your entire arm. That's it. You just take the bar and you just go like this a little bit, and you put the thing down, and it will foam like crazy, and then I mean, it's really awesome soap. I cannot speak highly enough of it because I used to use, I would get like the 6 packs or the 8s or 10s or whatever I could find, and of some of the brands that we all know, the big brands that we have here in America, and but they would only last like maybe a couple of weeks. Each bar of soap might only last for because they don't lather up great. The Duke Cannon lathers up great and will last for months. And
Okay.
granted, it's like $15 or something like that for a bar, but for enough soap to last like 3 months, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I sent Bandrew Scott from Podcastage. He came to visit us over Thanksgiving, so right before December, at the last week of November. And as soon as he left, like right after he left, I pulled out another bar of soap, and it was only like 2 weeks ago in mid March that that bar of soap ran out, and I sent him a message saying, "Hey, I'm cracking out, pulling out another bar of soap." But it
That's
lasted that long, with
that's
daily showers and whatever else. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
awesome stuff, and that may be something that it's better soap, and I use that. They also make body wash and stuff like that. But I mean, that's skincare routines and stuff. It's basically like wash your
Yeah.
hands and wash your body, and
Well, now we're in a
that's
more
it.
sanitized world. I just wondered how you were keeping up with it all.
Oh, with the hand sanitizers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I tell you, I use the hand sanitizers only when I
Have to.
I want to wet my hands down, basically.
Yeah.
Because I understand the purpose of it, but it dries your hands out. I still
Yeah,
prefer to
yeah.
wash them. And honestly, if you're talking about from an onset perspective, it's better if you just use the sanitizing hand wipes like what we use for babies, not the
Mm,
Lysol wipes or the bleach type, aggressive cleaning wipes, but the ones that are like 99.99% antibacterial, but
yeah.
they're still soft sanitizing, wipes. Those are still soft enough for you to use on your skin without giving like you take a Lysol wipe and you wipe down a table or
Like
something like that.
chemical
After
burn.
10 wipes, the skin's coming off your hands.
Yeah, that's
But like those sanitizing hand wipes, I always tell people you should keep those on your cart because if you go to Wire Talent, especially the first time that talent comes to see you, if you put hand sanitizer in your hand and you've just got through wrapping cable through, dog
mm,
poo on the
yeah,
ground, what's that hand sanitizer really going to do? Spread
mm,
it around.
yeah.
So what I always tell people to do is use a sanitizing hand wipe, do this number, glance at it. If it's dirty at all, when you throw that thing away, grab another one, do it again, then it comes up clear.
Mhm.
And if you know about an actor on your show that is concerned at all with you know sanitary, they're scared of anyone touching them. Make sure they see you doing this
Yeah.
and throwing that away, because the whole idea of wiping your hands with something and then literally throwing it away dispels all the dirt and garbage. So that is a much preferred approach in the world of production sound.
Mm. And well, from washing hands, how about washing poles? Is there like a kind of every 3 months, every week? What are you kind of doing in terms of a maintenance for your
As needed,
poles?
personally. Like if we go again, I still use ambient booms.
Mm.
I'm still using the QS pole, and I'll tell you this. I do really like the Series 5, but I still love the Series 4 QS poles the best. Um, and those booms right there, that boom, the QS pole, if it gets anything on it, I will try. If it requires to be like really aggressively wiped off with something, I will usually use a microfiber cloth and something like 409.
Mm.
409 is a cleaner we have here in America. I'll just spray that on the microfiber cloth and I'll wipe it down, and then I'll go back over it and wipe it off with another one after a couple moments. If I need to add any kind of a shine or a sheer to the boom pole, what I'll do is I'll do the same kind of thing again with a different microfiber cloth, usually one that's a plush, very plush. And then what I'll do is I'll wipe it down and then remove it with a super plush one, like a really thick one. I can show you these if you want to see them.
Mm. Yeah.
But what they do is that they are what that will do is I use Pledge furniture polish with orange oil built into it. The citrus kind of helps. But you wipe it down there and it makes a very silky type gliding feeling, and then you have to wipe it back off.
Mm.
So one of the things that when you first got the QS poles, they had a material on there where it's basically like they had the epoxy resin that as the sandwich of layers of the pre-preg carbon fiber were put together. Once it was put together, they would then grind down the outside so they had like no finish on it. It slid very
Ah.
well across your hands. But what I found is that on my hands would kind of get caught up a little bit on it. Sometimes I would hear it.
Mm.
So usually when I bought myself a QS pole, I would take the Pledge furniture polish with orange oil. I'd put it on my hand or on a microfiber cloth, and I'd wipe up and down the boom. I would extend that section. I would do the next section. I'd wipe it down as I extended it, and then I'd extend it. And there was the front entryway in my house where the chandelier and stuff was. I would always have a boom pole sitting up there for 24 hours with Pledge on there. Once
Mm.
it was done, I would wipe it all off in the same kind of thing. I'd wipe it off until it was completely, clear. But that was able to soak in just a little bit so that it was no longer that kind of almost that almost abrasive, kind of feel.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that anymore. It was silky smooth across my hands, but didn't get all the Pledge on your hands at the same time. I
Mm.
really loved it.
Nice. And so you're doing
Um,
it. And so if you took that over like the period, let's say you're doing a show for like 3 or 4 months, so you're just doing it as and when, as you notice it in different environments, and that's how you're kind of keeping on top of it.
yeah. If the cable, now another thing to keep in mind is that if you have an internally coiled cable, it's
Ah.
going to probably be better than an internal straight cable, because an internal straight cable, you have to manage the cable. You don't just let it hit the ground if you can avoid it, because anything that gets on that cable, you're going to be sucking up into the
Yeah.
boom pole, and that's going to get gunk and grime on the inside of your boom. So you have to be careful about that. So when you collapse a straight cable boom, you have to get into a routine of pulling a loop of it while you lower it, and you have to have a routine for that, because you want to try to avoid your cable from hitting the ground. Now, if you're on a sound stage, you might not mind as much. If you're outside, you
Yeah.
definitely
Of
want to be
course.
more careful about it when you put your boom pole on
Mm.
your shoe, for example. You always do that. Put your boom on your shoe,
Yeah.
and then pull up the cable. Um, but now we're getting into a lot more transmitters riding on the microphone end or on the butt
Yeah.
end of the boom also. So it just kind of depends.
Interesting. And we got a question from Jan, which is flying overseas with booms. We kind of touched on this a bit earlier about them looking like pipe bombs and stuff. I've done ones where I've like carried them on. I did have a shell case, which was actually for I think piano strings. I got it like secondhand. That was probably one of my
Mhm.
first like solid cases for it, and that's kind of ridden through. But what are your thoughts on have you ever flown overseas or I guess in interstates with your boom, or do you just rent wherever you're filming?
I have never flown with them with a boom pole, but I do know people that have. I've also known like the guy I mentioned before, Doug Cameron.
Mm,
He flew to Cuba to do Fast and Furious 5, no, 7, 8, whatever it was.
give me
Fast and Furious 7,
25.
whichever one was the one in Cuba.
Yeah.
Um, no, because 5 was Brazil. I think Cuba was 7, but when they flew down there, they ended up having some cargo, some big cargo bins or whatever they are filled up with gear, and then they closed them up and they sent them down there. Well, coming back, there was 2 Cubans that tried to stow away and hide to come
Oh.
to America. So they caught on to that, and they quickly the border security stopped it and said, "This gear is stopping. We're not going to allow it to travel. It's going to be all investigated." But that meant that when they came back to America, the cameras, they were just like, okay, fine, we'll just rent some more cameras. Okay, grip and electric stuff, we'll just rent that stuff. Boom poles,
Mm,
recorders, it's not as simple as just getting a camera and adding a couple strips of Velcro to it. You kind of have to have everything set up the way you want it to be. It's very much, your own personal, but Doug and I had talked so many times over the years about boom poles. I kind of knew how to do it. Now, I do know a lot of people that have sent boom poles domestically, and what they usually will do is they'll, if they can't put it in their luggage, they'll get something like a fish pole case.
yeah.
Plano makes one that's really good. You don't normally put it in the PVC pipe or anything like that, even though that would be pretty, good. But there are ways of doing of basically packaging it up. If you put it inside of a cardboard tube, for example, you list it and declare it as a boom pole. Then it would be something you have to usually, you're gonna have to check it. But
Yeah.
the main thing is call up the airline and call the TSA and ask them what they would recommend with an oversized thing that's, 2 inches thick and, a meter and a half long or whatever it is. And find out because the rules constantly change. And if you need to carry on something for a show that you're doing that afternoon or something like that, you need to make sure it gets on there. They may say wrap it up in cardboard and it's in a cardboard tube, and as long as it's taped or whatever, it's good. They may recommend that you send it down in advance,
Mm,
whatever.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good call actually. Yeah, because I've taken some on before, um, a couple of years ago. It definitely varies per airline as well. This is the other really annoying thing. Same with like the lithium batteries and that kind of deal. Like some of them will take
Individually
hundreds.
wrapped, it has to be individually packaged. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. And we got another question from Charlie, says that he's a trainee. And
Mhm.
what are some of the best qualities in terms of a second AS utility sound from your perspective as a boom operator?
Paying attention is a big one. You got to constantly be listening. The best utilities I know are the ones that are constantly paying attention. It's yes, you've wired people. Yes, you've done all your paperwork and you're sitting there idle
Yeah,
during a take. But that doesn't mean pull out your phone, space out, start watching episodes of some show and then just completely tune out. If need to be actively listening during a take, listen. If you hear a lob that starts to get scratchy, start to gravitate towards set to make that adjustment as soon as you reset and you get ready to go again. I don't want to have to wait on a utility who's over at Crafty not paying attention.
classic. Yeah.
Call them out there. Then it's like, oh, what's the matter with it? Well, it was scratchy. Who was it? Well, who was it, Mixer? And they'll say, oh, it was number 4 or whatever. Oh, okay. Oh, he has an RM11. I need to get another sticky. So now you have to leave Crafty, go over to your car, whatever. Be paying attention. That's the biggest thing I can tell you right there. Pay attention. If you, Charlie, if you're not familiar with Patricia Mirswad's book, Behind the Sound Cart, it's a very big, it's the now golden standard for becoming a sound utility. It is something you need to read. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it, but it's called Behind the Sound Cart. You need to get that book. I have a video about it on Sound Speeds where I said I call it. I don't call it just a book. I call it a manual because if your car starts to mess up and you need to figure out what's wrong with it, you look at the manual. Just like when you want to figure out what you're not doing right with the sound utility position, you look at the manual. It is literally a training manual that will teach you what you need to know from someone that's been doing this for over 4 decades. Very well, very, very well known. As a matter of fact, she's in the process right now of writing a boom book.
Mm.
And um, her time frame, she has to get stuff in, I think, by next week. I've been writing some stuff for it, but I'm just not going to be able to make the deadline she needs. And she is a machine. She is like day and night writing, and she's got a passion for this and has been writing for months. And so when that boom book comes out, you're going to want to read that too, because she sent me some stuff last night to peruse, and she's already got so much stuff in there, and I just kind of added only a few things to it. I've written a few segments for it also, but she is very on the ball with this book. It is a very, very extensive amount of knowledge in there. So definitely get behind the sound cart and read that, because I think that will be something that will teach you a lot from a sound utility perspective.
That's very interesting. And I think, yeah, definitely being on, I find that in general, like the most effective parts of any department are the people that are there that are actually engaged in what's going on. Not, I mean,
Yeah.
not every day can literally be go, 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 go. But if you're doing it, if you've set up for a scene and stuff, then definitely like be there, be involved. And I find half the time I know what's going on before most of the other people do, because I mean, one job and all of that, and listening
Well, one
about
of the
what's.
things that I really appreciated before COVID, of course, and wearing masks and stuff like that made it very difficult. But I can have a microphone on set, and I'll be looking at someone across the whole set, and I'll just be looking at their lips, and I'll be piecing it together with what I hear in the room, and I'll just be staring at them. And as long as I kind of have a bead on them, I can kind of pick out probably half to 2/3 of their words and figure out the rest from their mouth on the fly. And because of that, I'll be at the other side of a noisy room, and someone will come over and start talking to me. I'll be like, 1 second. They're like, what? I'm like, I'm listening. And they're like, you can hear the director and the DP talking over there. I'm like, yeah, I am. Hold on 1 second. And I'll be listening. And they're like, how can you hear that? I'm like, it's my superpower. That's why I'm in sound. That's what I always tell them. I'm like, there's a reason I'm in sound, dude. And they're just like, dude, I don't know how you were able to do that. But that's part of, what it is being able to look at and listen to and making eye contact and really just studying, what people are doing. So
Well,
yeah,
information is definitely king.
it's
And
our industry.
yeah, that's it. Constantine, what do you think about the best mic for boom in a rainy situation? I think this means more like rain covers. I mean, you can get mics that are waterproof, but I'm going to take this question
You
as
still want
like
to cover them. Yeah. And that's the thing is, it's the same thing as saying, what's the best microphone to use indoors or outdoors or whatever else. The microphone is a microphone, but what
yeah.
you cover it with is going to be what's most important. Personally, I'm a diehard fan of Sonella. The Sonella piano and pianissimo are, in my opinion, unmatched. There is nothing better. If you get the piano or the pianissimo for your microphone, which granted they don't have one for a long shotgun, so I think the biggest one they have is like for the CMED or the CS3 3E or something like that. But
Yeah.
if you can get one of those Sonellas, they're more pricey, but they are so good. Then you get the Pia Kelly rain cover for it as well. And that is like it feels kind of like a very not a dense sponge, but it's a very loose type of sponge, but it's made of like uh it's like it gives, but I don't know how to word it. It's like a plastic that feels more like a sponge, but if you get that and you cover it with your Zeppelin, it's still very much transparent. You can hear through it very well, but then you spray that with a water repellent spray. And the
Interesting.
outside of that, the water's still gonna hit it, but as it starts to run off, it's gonna run off of the sides of the Zeppelin. It's not gonna
Mm,
go into the microphone nearly as much. So that right there, because the Sonella isn't just like a Rycote diameter like this with the microphone on the inside, Sonellas are bigger. So
yeah.
there's more. It's not like a Rycote Cyclone either. It's a bigger thing, but it's more like a dome shape. It's more like an egg shape, but it's very, very, it's big, it's open, it's light, it's the best in my opinion. But then you put the Pia Kelly on the outside. Now Rycote does sell the Duck. Remote Audio still sells their Rain Man.
Yeah.
There's still different options like that, and there's probably going to be some there's people out there that will tell you, well, just throw the fur on the boom and it's going to be fine. The thing is, though, that's going to fill up with water. It's not going to become, it's going to lose its acoustic transparency. It's going to become extremely heavy. Mixers don't care because their boom operators have to deal with it. But it's like, but it's not going to sound good. You need to get yourself an actual rain cover that sounds good.
And I guess like while you're actually filming, if you're filming scenes, I guess that are using water, or you're in a location where it's raining, there's going to be a point where it becomes like there has to be like a fine line of rain. This can't be like full on thunderstorms, right? This is what do you reckon your
Well,
Sonella would hold up in, I don't know, documentaries of tornadoes or something?
well, that would be a stretch for pretty much anything. I wouldn't put a boob up in a tornado for sure. But like I have been on set before where they've come out with the rainmakers, which, makes very, very thick rain drops that will hit all over the place. But the thing is, though, a microphone is still going to pick up all that sound.
Yeah,
It's still going to be hitting the ground. You're still going to hear the patch. You're still going to hear the rain covers in the umbrellas over the camera, and you're going to still hear all the plastic and stuff that's wrapping the camera. You're going to hear all that. So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to cue the microphone away from all those noises as much as possible. Put it inside of a very good rain cover, spray it with the water repellent spray, and do your best,
yeah,
because Post has great tools at their fingertips now where they can really use to dial in on the sound and really pull out and extract the dialogue much better than they used to be able to. So as
mm,
long as you try to minimize by using the polar pattern, to your benefit, and as long as you properly protect the microphone, so that way things don't get in there and actually physically
yeah,
affect the microphone. Now, some microphones are more prone to humidity checks, but the thing is that as a general rule, and you even asked me this, like you asked me about the Shep C-Mid 5U and the CMC 641 in the last sound chat that we did years
yeah,
ago, and I said, what I said is it's not that big of a deal as long as you know how to manage it.
yeah,
Because the thing is, if you were to be inside of a very heavily air conditioned room and it's hot and muggy outside, and you take that microphone and you walk outside, instantly the dew is going to affect it and start condensation on the microphone. Thing is, you don't do that.
yeah.
You don't do that. You don't store your microphone in a warm box and then pull it out and let it expose to the air. You put that in some sort of a box where it's constantly not under pressure, where it's constantly acclimated to the temperature around it. If it's inside the sound trailer, it's going to be acclimated to that temperature. It's going to, and so that way, as soon as you pull it out of its case or whatever in the morning, it's going to be there. It's going to be ready to work. You put it on, you get some fan power running to it. It's going to warm up a little bit. It's going to be fine. But,
Yeah.
and so therefore it's not really a big deal, but you got to be careful if you're using a microphone that's more prone, like a DC bias microphone is more prone to humidity. You use that microphone in a place that when they're raining, you just got to keep the rain off of it, put it in a rain cover. It's going to be fine. But that's the main thing, is you just have to manage the microphone for humidity, for
Yeah.
high humidity.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very good point. It's similar to like the whole I don't know, taking lenses work
Yeah, they'll
exactly
fog
the same,
over.
right? They
Yeah.
just fall up.
And
As
then
you say.
they'll sit there with a hair dryer and try to defog the lenses. And the second they turn off the hair dryer and the thing goes cool again, it fogs up again. And then you have the ACs that are panicking because
That's
they were like, well, the lenses are going to stay on the nice climate controlled
yeah,
trailer overnight.
truck, yeah.
And then we pull them out and bring them out into the 30-degree weather and it fogs over. And they start panicking and pull out it's like, guys, come on, this is physics. It's the same kind of thing as your batteries. Your
Yeah.
batteries, if you keep them all warm and stuff, and then you take them outside, the charge is going to drop on them. But if you keep those batteries acclimated to the weather constantly, and you recharge and cycle them, and you cycle them in cold weather, and then when they discharge in cold weather, you recharge them in cold weather, they're going to be better than they will be if you keep them you charge them in a warm environment, then put them and take them outside.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because generally in my bag I'm keeping them. I keep a spare, but it's in between the mixers, so it's probably warmer.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm losing some charge as well.
Maybe, but if you put them in your pockets also, that will help.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
usually if you try to keep it someplace where it's near you, it'll still be better,
Yeah.
than it would be if you keep it in a warm, you wrap it up in an electric blanket
Yeah.
and then you bring it to set and you take it out and you then put it inside of something that's going to drop real quick.
Yeah.
It's chemicals,
Amazing.
man.
Yeah. That's it. Science.
Science.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I think that's all the questions I have. I feel like the 1 hour 20 mark is a pretty classic mark for previous sound chats that I've done. But definitely, we should continue this conversation again, and maybe come up with more segments. Maybe we can make this a regular show. I'm
Maybe.
finally getting into doing more content stuff. It's quite fun, and I'll throw up. Andrew P says,
Hello, Andrew. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you.
yeah. So yeah, everyone else, you can keep writing comments. I'm gonna go to bed because it's 10:30, and I have a 10-month-old that gets up very early, and then a toddler that wakes me up even earlier.
Oh,
So
goody.
yeah, that's it. So I've got that to look forward to.
All my kids now. My oldest daughter is now 18. So there's
Amazing. Oh my god.
18, almost 15, and then 7. So they're
No.
they're they're not waking me up in the middle of the night. If they wake me up, it better be for a reason.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
what?
That's it. All right. Well, I guess we'll end the live stream and then we can chat offline a little bit.
Sure.
But thanks so much, everyone, for joining in for this impromptu sound chat. Again, very off the cuff and not scheduled at all, like my usual self. But consistency is key, if
It
anything.
is.
So I'll say ciao for now, everyone. All right. Bye.
Take care.